Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my Chess Realm YouTube channel. Women European Championship recently ended. Elina Danielian won, by the way. But let's go to the fifth round. I found a very interesting game between Nino Batsiashvili and Anna Sargsyan. Both of them are grandmasters. So let's see what happened in the game. Nino Batsiashvili had white pieces and she started with d4, d5, c4, c6, and we have Slav defense. C captures on d5, c pawn recaptures, and we have exchange variations. White usually play this variation when they want to draw, but this game will be far from drawing. So bishop goes to f4, knight to c6, e3, knight to f6, bishop to b5, pinning the knight, bishop to d7, unpinning, knight to c3, e6, knight to f3, and bishop to b4. So far so good, everything more or less according to the theory, almost symmetrical position. And now white has decided to castle kingside, black also. And now bishop goes back to d3, eyeing this h7 square. This bishop will cause a lot of problems later in the game. Okay, so c file is open. So black occupies with rook, white immediately counteracts with rook to c1. And now a6, protecting b5 square, preventing any unpleasant knight jump. And now white plays queen to e2. Black also intends to play queen to e7, it's just that then bishop to g5 and black gets a very unpleasant pin on the knight. So black plays h6, preventing the pin, now h3, and now queen to e7. And now white plays a3, attacking the bishop, so black has to decide what to do with the bishop. Doesn't want to trade for the knight, so bishop goes to d6, and now knight to e5. Well, of course, black cannot capture because pawn recaptures and these two pieces are forked. Moreover, if bishop captures, then pawn recaptures, attacking knight. There are not many good squares for the knight, so white is better from strategically point of view here. So black plays b5, b4, and now knight to a7, making way for his rook on the c file, and now white plays e4, striking the center. Capturing is very bad option because then knight recaptures, and now white threatens with knight to g6. Let's see, black makes a random move, then knight to g6, forking both pieces. When black recaptures, then bishop gets the piece back, also gaining here the exchange. If, however, knight captures on e4, then queen to e4, threatening mate. Even after f5, then queen to b7, attacking the knight, still knight to g6, forking both pieces is still a threat. And if, for example, bishop captures on e5, then d pawn recaptures. Again, there aren't many good squares for the knight. For example, at the knight to d5, knight to f6 is a very unpleasant move. Black cannot capture because then queen to g4 check, king to h8, and bishop to h6, threatening mate on g7. So after rook to g8, then queen to h4, threatening with discover check with mate. Even after rook to g6, still discover check, and white gains decisive advantage. Okay, so here black would have to play knight to f6. After pawn captures, then queen recaptures, queen to e4, again very unpleasant threat. Black can only prevent it with g6, but then either this pawn falls on h6 or maybe bishop to e5, also very unpleasant. White definitely gets the edge here. So black has decided to keep the tension in the center. a5 was played, and now e pawn captures on d5, and black has decided to trade some pieces with the help of a little tactics. So rook captures on c3, rook recaptures, pawn on d5 is no longer protected, so knight to d5, forking both pieces. Well, of course, white cannot remove the rook because then knight captures on f4. After white removes queen, now black has two bishops for the rook. It's a far better position for black. So white plays bishop to d2, knight captures on c3, bishop recaptures, and now rook to c8, attacking the bishop, queen to d2, defending, and now bishop to e8, making a way for queen to put more pressure along the c file. And now white captures on a5, bishop recaptures, material is still equal. This pawn on b file is going to advance, so white plays rook to b1. Now b4 square is attacked 3 times, so black cannot advance with b pawn yet. So black plays queen to c7, double attack on the bishop. White defends with rook to b3, protecting, also attacking bishop on a3. Black removes bishop to d6, and now queen to e1. Again threatening queen to e4, very unpleasant threat on queen to h7. So black plays queen to b7, queen to e4 is no longer possible, unless white wants to trade queens. Black threatens with queen to d5, very unpleasant move. Let's see if white makes a random move, then after queen to d5, rook is under attack. If white removes the rook, then bishop captures on e5. Queen has to protect bishop, so white can only capture with pawn. After queen to e3, black is a piece up. And if, for example, queen goes to b3, protecting the rook, then rook captures on c3. After rook recaptures, then queen to d4. After white removes rook, then queen captures knight, and black gets 2 pieces for the rook. Okay, so in the game, white played bishop to e4, attacking queen on b7. Also queen to d5 is no longer possible, so queen goes to a6, and now bishop to d2. You can see that these two bishops are eyeing on the black king, but black is still not sensing any danger. Knight to c6 was played, so knight is coming back in the game, also attacking pawn on d4, who is not protected yet, but white doesn't care. Rook to g3, and we have reached a critical position in the game. Pawn on g7 is pinned, so white threatens with bishop to h6. Still, there wouldn't be anything wrong with knight to d4, even after bishop to h6. One way to defend the king is g6, maybe even better bishop to f8. G7 square is now protected. Even after queen to e3 attacking the knight, and queen to d6 defending, it's not very likely that white would be able to develop any serious attack here. Black, however, saw the things differently, and this rook on g3 was really annoying, so king to f8 was played, moving king out of the g file. Believe it or not, black king just ordered a coffin for himself with this move. Queen to e3 was played. Now white threatens with rook to g7. Well, let's see if black is greedy and captures pawn on a5, for example, then rook to g7. Of course, black cannot capture because after queen on h6, check, king to g8, queen to h7, king to f8, knight to g6. Black can only capture, and after bishop to h6, it's checkmate. But you might wonder, what about knight to c3, forking both pieces? Well, in this case, rook captures on f7. If king doesn't want to get mated into move, then bishop has to recapture, and queen to h6 check. If king goes to g8, then queen to h7, king to f8, and queen to f7 checkmate. There are still 2 options for black. Well, let's see. If king goes to e7, then bishop to g5 check, king to f8, queen to h8. Bishop to f8 is the only move, and now bishop to c6. King cannot go anywhere. Black can either lose decisive advantage, or he can play rook to c6. Well, then queen to f6, and now white threatens with mate on d8 or mate on f7. Black cannot defend both threats. And if, for example, king goes to e8, then queen to h8 check, bishop to f8. Now white doesn't have time to place bishop on g5, so here white would have to play bishop to b4, threatening with mate on f8 with queen. And the only way to stop this is knight to d6. And now black is stoned and pinned and cannot do anything. There are many ways for white to win this position, even with a rook down. Okay, so for example, one way to convert the advantage is bishop to b7, black captures, then bishop captures on d6, and black can only prevent mate with queen to e7. After bishop captures, king recaptures, queen to e7. Bishop is pinned, and black is going to lose bishop. Queen versus rook is a decisive advantage for white. If for example, black plays queen to a1, check, then king to h2, queen to d4, bishop captures on d6, queen recaptures, and bishop captures on c8. Material is almost equal, still black is lost. For example, if black decides to advance with pawn, then simple queen to f6, threatening with checkmate. Black can of course defend with queen to e7, but after bishop to d7, king can only go to d8. Now knight to c6, both pieces are 40, and black loses queen. After king captures on d7, knight capture, bishop captures, queen captures, winning position for white. Okay, so the bottom line is black has to prevent this rook to g7 at any cost. Maybe the best option would be knight to e5, trading material. Still, white would have the edge even in this position, but black has decided to play g5. Of course, pawn on g5 is protected by pawn, so black thinks he is rescued. Well, not exactly. Now here comes spectacular rook captures on g5, pawn recaptures, and now queen captures on g5. Well, white is a rook down. Okay, he has two pawns, but still we are far away from building a mating net, so this was a result of a very precise calculation, and white will have to play accurately from now on. I don't know, maybe white was just so far seeing or clairvoyant. I think this is amazing. Well, white threatens with queen to h6. Again, for example, if black makes a random move, queen to h6, if king go to e7, then bishop to g5, black can only play f6, bishop captures, its checkmate. If, however, king goes to g8, queen to h7, king to f8, knight to g6, pawn captures, and it's checkmate. Okay, so in the game, black has decided to get rid of this knight on e5, pawn recaptures, and now bishop on d6 is under attack. Again, there are many options. It's hard to analyze them all, but I'll try. Well, let's see, black returns some material after bishop to e5, for example, queen recaptures. White will probably want to place his queen on f6, then with bishop to h6 create a mating net, so maybe after king to e7, then bishop goes to g5, king to d7, queen to f7, threatening with queen to e7 checkmate, so black can defend it only by queen to d6, and now this pawn can easily advance. Of course, rook has to protect d7 square, because if d8 square is not protected, then queen to d8 also checkmate. Again, e5 doesn't help. After that, bishop to f5 check, king to f7. After trading material, white is winning. Maybe another option would be rook to c5. Now pawn on d5 is pinned. Well, let's see, after that queen to h6, again king can go either to g8 or e7. Well, let's see what happens if king goes to e7, then queen to f6 check, king to d7, bishop to g5, again threatening queen to d8 with checkmate. Bishop d5 doesn't help, it's queen to d8 mate anyway. Maybe after queen to e5, now d8 square is protected. Well, then we have e-pawn captures on d6, threatening with queen to e7, later mate on b7. So here black would have to capture after queen to d4. If king goes to c7, it's queen to d8 checkmate. So here black can only play rook to d5 after bishop captures, pawn recaptures, material is equal, but with king in the open and white is on the move. Black is losing, for example, queen to f6. King cannot go to c7 because he gets skewered. So after king to c5, then queen to e7, and white gains decisive material advantage. Okay, so in the game, white played bishop to c5, and now white plays queen to f6, threatening with bishop to h6, later mate on g7. So black plays queen to c6, making room for his king on e8, and now white plays bishop to g6, pawn on f7 is pinned, so white threatens with queen to f7, checkmate. Black plays queen to b7, now queen is defending pawn on f7, white plays a6, hoping that queen will capture pawn. Of course that doesn't happen, queen to c7 was played, and now bishop to g5. Bishop is protecting e7 square, so white threatens with queen to h8, checkmate. So black can of course play king to g8, but then we have a bishop sack, bishop to h7, king captures, queen to h6, king to g8, bishop to f6, and mate on g7 is unstoppable. Well, yes, black can deliver a few checks, but that's it. So in the game, black played king to e8, now queen captures on e6, of course pawn on f7 is pinned, so cannot capture queen. Well, of course, if queen goes to e7, then queen to c8, queen to d8, queen to d8 checkmate. If, however, bishop to e7, then queen to f7. If king goes to d7 immediately, queen to e7 checkmate. If king goes to d8, then queen to f8, king to d7, and queen to e7 checkmate. Of course, if bishop to e8, then queen to e8 checkmate. So black played in the game king to f8, and now queen again goes to f6, again threatening with mate on h8. So king goes back to e8, and now e6, threatening with capturing on f7 with mate in the second move. Of course, queen to e7 doesn't help, after that queen to h8, queen to f8, and bishop to f7 checkmate. So in the game, black captures bishop on g6, now queen captures his check. Let's see what black can do. Well, of course, if queen goes to f7, then it's checkmate. King can only go to f8, but then we have e7 check again. King can't go anywhere. If bishop captures, it's bishop to h6 checkmate. If queen captures, then again bishop to h6. King cannot go anywhere. After queen to g7, queen to g7, king to e8, and queen to e5, forking both pieces, gaining decisive material advantage. Bishop to e7 doesn't help. After that, bishop to g5, again bishop is pinned. White gains decisive material advantage, and realizing that all is lost in this position, Anna Sargsyan resigned the game. So I hope you like this game and that you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.